All right, so first thing we're doing is going to Documents, going into Maya, and we're deleting the old preferences. So if you need to delete the old preferences, we delete the old ones. And then we're going into our folder, Winter 14, 2540, copying, or right-click, copying the preferences, and then pasting them in. Okay, and then just reopening Maya right there.
Scratch question real quick. Do you now have the due dates for the assignments or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Right now we're just taking it as we go.
How do we open the folder? In the file?
Okay.
Open C.
No, we're going to go to File, and then we're going to set the project first. Okay. So every time we come into Maya, we have to set our project to tell Maya what we're working on. If you weren't comfortable with that in the intro class, you definitely want to get more comfortable with it here. So under File, Set Project. And then our project we worked on last time was just day one playing. So that's what we're going to click on, is day one playing, whatever your name was. Okay. If it doesn't take you right into your project folder, then most likely your preferences didn't get copied. All right. So we can work on that after we get done with this. For now, it's not going to be a huge deal. You can just go find them, go to the D drive, and locate them wherever they're at. And if at any point during this you get lost, just let me know and we'll catch you up.
Are we taking more notes today?
Yes, always taking notes. Okay.
Let us know what to write down.
Yes, I will. Okay, then we're just going to go to File Open, or Control O, and then open up that scene file that we had last time. Okay, so here are those balls that we did last time. Let me hit the lights.
I only need 3 of them. That was okay, right?
That's okay, yes. I added an extra one. These are the ones we used last time, and if we go in here and we just look at the graph editor, just so we can see what it's doing, okay, I can just click on all of them or one of them or whatever and hit my little graph editor button, and it'll pop open the graph editor. Okay. Now the graph editor allows us to see what each one is doing. We can isolate each one, or we can individually pick them out here and then see individually each one. Okay. So whichever way makes it easier, that's what we want to do. So if we look at this, here's the flat one. Okay, so right at the beginning, what's this one going to be doing, the flat one? Slow. Okay, so right at the beginning it's slow because this line doesn't have a whole lot of change. Okay, if you look at it like this, here is the value here, and then I just go up to whatever, 5, and I see how much value has actually changed there. I can kind of guesstimate to see how much of a difference it's going to make. Now let me go in here. And you see how I can zoom in right on that point. And right here, it doesn't look like there's really much of any change at all. Okay? It's also going to depend on where we're scaled into. If we're zoomed in super close, it's going to look one way. If we're zoomed in super far, it's going to look another way. Okay? And we'll really see that when we start animating things like rotate. If we move something from 0 to 10, and then we also animate as rotation from 0 to 360, those graphs are going to be crazy. Because one graph is going to go up 360 units, the other one's going to go up 10. So it's going to look completely bizarre to see these kinds of things. Okay. Also, I can kind of stretch this like this and say, wow, there's not a whole lot of movement that way either. All I've done is compress my graph. And then the same thing I can do it this way.
What key did you use for that?
It's Alt, Shift, and then left and middle mouse button. I don't normally tell people that because of that exact reason. Okay, and the same thing here. You can see, wow, there's a whole lot of movement in this. But again, it's only because of how I'm looking at the graph. Yeah, Shift, Alt, left, and middle. And then you drag up and down to go this way, and you drag left and right to go that way. It's a ridiculous thing, but sometimes you need it. Sometimes you're just compressed with a bunch of keys, and you just need to get in there and spread them out. All right? It allows us to see the speed that these things are moving and adjust the speed that they're moving. Okay? So we can look at this and say, okay, well, here is this, this flat one we do have this slow in, we have this slow out. But this isn't set in stone. You'll see that we have handlebars just like we would have inside of Photoshop, inside of Illustrator, InDesign, any of those pen programs. So what we can do is on your flat curve, you can marquee it, okay? And I'm just marking the middle of this. And then I'm going to go to tangents and say free tangent weight. Nope, sorry. I'm going to go to curves first, and then go to weighted tangent. There you go. So highlight your curve.
Wait, where? Oh, okay.
And then go to curves, free weighted tangent.
Oh, what?
Yep, all the way on the bottom.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. And now that changes it to these little circle ones. Now I've never just turned it down to weighted tangent. It's always like a two-step process. Okay.
How do you move the thing? Because I can't see the end of the line.
Hit F.
Oh.
Okay. And so once we do weighted tangents, then we can go under tangents and say free tangent weight. Okay. So write that down so you remember. It's always going to be curves, weighted tangents, tangents, free tangent weight. Okay. Now what this allows us to do is play with these handles a bit more. Okay. So now we have the handlebars. If you look at them, there's like these little openings in the handlebar itself. They're square and they're open. Okay. Before, let me just undo so we see what the before was. They were small and they were solid. We redo that again. Now they're open and square and a bit longer than they were before. Okay. So now if we go to the Move tool, W, and we marquee one of the handles, we can middle drag it, not left drag it, but middle drag it, and play with that speed of that ball moving. Okay. So we can create a number of different ways that this ball is going to move. By doing this one, what's it going to do at the beginning?
Really fast. Really fast.
Right. It's going to go really fast at the beginning and then slow down.
Do you want us to move it like that?
Tangent, free tangent weight.
Do you want us to do that like you did to your curve?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Okay. So right now, exactly what you just said. It's going to go super quick at the beginning, and then it's going to slow down at the end. Okay. Now some things have a different kind of slowdown. Yes, sir. You marquee it to select it, and then middle mouse button drag it. But make sure you're in the Move tool.
I had a question.
I'm
My
good.
balls were moving.
I have to wave my balls
I
on.
didn't give him
I
face
need my.
You didn't give him what?
The way
I didn't ask you that.
Oh, hit stop.
Wait,
So next to your keyframe,
round
you have to say
thing.
set this, not the bottom one, to real time. That way, the fastest is going to go with real time. Okay, so it's save and then play. Mm-hmm. You did not go to tangents and say free tangent weight.
Oh, free tangent. So non-weighted tangents?
No, under the tangent one.
This one?
Nope, you already did that. So that's why they're circles. They go to tangents now and say free tangent weight. And that's what's going to allow you to be able to stretch it out.
Okay.
Okay, so we're really controlling how this ball is moving in the scene. It's like shooting across, and then there's really a lot of slowdown time. Okay, if we look at where the ball is, basically it's, you know, right about here, let's say at frame 20. At frame 20,
Go to a document folder now?
nope, I'm gonna get something first, and then I'm gonna show some stuff, and then you can go to it. Didn't already put it there. Nope, not yet. Enter. All right, I'm going to show this thing here. Oops. And we'll turn a loop, and we'll look at it. Okay, so what we're looking at in this animation is 3 different things animated. There's 3 different animations going on. Okay. Now the animation that you see on the left is exactly the same animation you're seeing on the right. Okay. The only difference, if I pause this, we can see the difference right there, especially in that middle one. See that there? That's motion blur. If you watch a movie and you pause a frame and you kind of go frame by frame, you'll see lots of motion blur. This is what happens in the real world. Okay? When they're videotaping something and they have this arm that's kind of moving very, very quickly, there's going to be some blurring that's going to go on. And that's what makes something look realistic. So in here, there's no motion blur. So if you watch it again, you're going to see how this one doesn't really look as realistic as that one does. Okay? It's a subtle thing, but it definitely adds to that look of it. All right? Now this is just a little stick thing. There's a huge difference in render time when we get into advanced stuff and having motion blur on some more advanced things. All right, it might take your render time from an hour to 4 hours, okay, or 2 hours to 8 hours or whatever. All right, it all depends on your scene. So we want to use it sparingly. We want to use it on the objects that matter, even though we're not seeing it. Let me go up a couple frames. Like.
So what you're saying is you would want to use more realism on things that really matter.
Right. Realism on things that matter. This plane that's here, Maya's still calculating the motion blur for it. Okay? It's not moving. There's no reason to calculate motion blur for it. Now imagine that you had a helicopter spinning around with its propeller. There's no way you can get a helicopter propeller to look real spinning without motion blur. Okay? That's what makes it look real. That's why we see basically that shape of the cylinder and we see those lines in it. That's what's going to make it look real. All right? So animation isn't always just about the graph editor or always just about knowing the animation stuff. It's also doing this kind of stuff to push it a little bit further into the realism, to make people believe that it's actually moving. And this is how we do it. In this still frame, you have no idea what it's doing. Is it stuck there? Is it, what's it doing? Here, there's no doubt. There's movement. Just in that still, you can tell there's some movement happening. And you can tell in the top, there's a lot more movement than here, and then there. Okay? All right, so that's number 1 that we're kind of looking at in this. The second thing we're looking at in this is the kind of animation that we're experiencing. The top one up here is the boring animation. Okay? All those little sections of this stick are all rotating the exact same way both ways. Okay? So it basically rotates all of them 30 degrees this way, 20 degrees this way, 15, 10, 5, whatever it happens to be. And it cuts off because it's just so boring you don't want to look at it. Okay? So this is the boring one. This one here is a little bit different because each one is kind of different. Each one of those little sticks is independent of each other. Okay? And what I mean by that is if you look at this, let's go here. Okay? In this one you can see up here every stick is bending at the exact same value. Down here we don't have that. Okay, this one is bending here. This one is bending a little bit. This one's bending a little bit less. This one might be bending a little bit more. Okay, depending on where your forces are, depending on where your weight of the object is going to kind of dictate that. All right. If there's a lot of weight down here, that might dictate more of how these things are bending. If there's a lot of weight up here, then that's going to dictate more how these are bending. Okay. Instead of it being like this little arch, it might be bent over like that. Okay, because the top of it has so much weight that it just pulls it down that much. And then when it flips to the other side, then that's going to drive it to the other side. All right. So this one here is a little bit better because it has a little bit more control over each one of these pieces individually. All right. And then this middle one, that's the best one. And that's the one I went through the graph editor on and tweaked some of those things just to kind of get them to look a little bit more natural. And a lot of this is just subtle work. A lot of it is just subtle detail to play with it a little bit more. So you can see here, it flops, it flops, it flops, and then it kind of comes back into rest. This one is still pretty static. It's still pretty just like, moving at a constant rate and then getting in there. The middle one has a little bit more interest to it. Okay? So throughout all of your animations, you should be kind of looking at this and not just saying, yes, I did do the animation, but can I make it better? And then can I make that better? Okay? We always want to take it to that level that looks really, really good and looks believable. All right? Now, you may get to the point where you've gotten maybe a little bit too far in the bad side and it's unrecoverable, and it's better just to kind of go back to square one and wipe out the keyframes and do it again, okay? Especially, we're going to do this assignment. Especially when you're doing this, we're only setting a couple keyframes. Each one of these things, 1, 2, 3, 4 things, we're setting 4 keyframes. That's it, okay? 4 keyframed objects is all we're doing. Back and forth, that's it. Oops.
So that was at least for the squiggly line?
Well, we have 4 objects here that we're keyframing, and every time they go, you know, one side is a keyframe, the other side's a keyframe. So it's not a terrible amount of keyframes in there. It's just a matter of playing with it and not being afraid to say, you know what, it's not working out, I'm going to do it again, or I'm going to start over. You're going to learn so much more the second time you do it, the third time you do it, the fourth time you do it, than just doing it right the first time, okay? Because that first time might just be a fluke, okay? I've done that plenty of times where I'll be at home, I'll do something, perfect. I come to class and then it's a big botch job because I didn't realize that I clicked this button here and then not that button at school and whatever else. Okay, so we're going to do this assignment. This is our first assignment we're going to do, and we're only doing this one. We're only doing this middle best one, okay? But I wanted you to see what bad work looks like. It's not that it's bad, it's just not where it could be, okay? And then where the middle ground is, and then where that ultimate level of detail is going to be at. All right, so I'm going to show this also. In the left column there, you'll see where it says resources. Yep, go to Documents, and then on the left side you'll see where it says Resources, somewhere in there. And then in 2540, there's a folder that's called Stick. Okay, so we're just going to copy that folder.
I don't see it on.
Okay, so we're going to copy Stick. We're going to go to our D drive, go to our folder, and then make sure you paste it into your work folder because we're going to be working right off of this one, okay? You're going to have my final file, and you're going to also have the movie, so you can look at the movie if you want, take it home, show it to the kids. And you also have the starting file, which is the most important part. Yes, sir?
Can you delete autosaves?
You can, yeah.
And
We're going to jump back to Maya. Yeah, we're going to get out of the ball one, okay? Now, if we want to work on the stick one, we can't just open the stick one. We have to set the project to stick and then open it. So we go to File, Set Project. Okay, and it should be right there. There's stick. So we click on stick, and we hit Set.
not good for anything.
Mine says it's missing something.
Just hit Create Default Workspace.
Okay, let's see. File. Oops.
That's odd. Whatever. Okay, so now we have our project set. Then we can open it. What?
Where in the stick did we set up?
Stick reg or stick reg animation.
Stick.
There's a secondary folder.
Oh, that's why. Sorry. So when you set your project, sorry about that, set it to stick, and then inside the stick folder, set it to that stick. There we go.
What?
Stick section.
Well, I did it to the set to the stick, and now it says open scene, right?
Yes. If you don't see the thing in there, let's all go back to this if you don't have it ready.
Is it?
Because I forgot that I copied it into a folder.
Why?
Okay, so we're going to go to File and go back to Set Project. And then inside the stick folder, here's the stick folder, we're going to set it to this stick folder. I should have just had this copied out of there or whatever. Okay, so now we've set it to the correct stick folder. Then we can go to File, Open, and we're going to go to the stick rig. Okay?
Now open it, right?
Yes. I'm opening up the other one just to show you it, but you can open up that one. We're working on the rig one, but I want to show you the animation one and show you some of the other stuff that's kind of available in Maya. That's kind of a neat feature. It has its place. It has some cool stuff in there. It's kind of an advanced thing, but I think it's kind of neat. You're familiar with display layers, We've used these before to kind of hide things, organize our scene file. So I could turn this on and off. Okay.
Oh, you mean the surfaces? Is that how you got all that color on it?
Right. And then under the animation layer, I have what are called animation layers. And essentially what I can do is make an animation on a layer and then turn that animation on or off, or I can stack layers together to create different animations. So right now I have this set up. I have my boring layer on. So right now it's set to on, and it's showing it. So if I rewind this and play it, there's the boring one. Okay. So I could turn that off, and I could turn on the best one. And then I'm looking at right now the best one. Okay. Now this is why it's very more of an advanced thing, is because when I grab one of these pieces and I go into the graph editor for this, I not only have the keyframes for that object on this layer, but I also have it for the other layers. So this gets really confusing if you're playing with it, okay? But it's really a cool thing because you could basically create iterations of things. So if you say I want to create a bouncing ball and I want to have it look heavy, okay? You can create that on one layer called heavy bouncing ball. On another layer you can create a light bouncing ball. On another layer you can create whatever, okay? So it's kind of a neat thing that's in there. So if you're looking through my file, you have to go to the animation layers and go to which one you want to see, and then you can play it. Okay. So we're going to go into this stick rig one, which is one you guys have already opened. And this is set up. This is actually rigged. And eventually we're going to get into what rigging is and how to set this stuff up. But it makes things easier. It makes your workload a lot easier. Okay. So one of the things that this thing does is I can't select any of the geometry. Okay? I can't accidentally grab this bar and move it 3 yards off and screw up my animation. The only thing I can grab is stuff that I want to animate. That's what a rig does. A rig takes all the guesswork from the animator and say, okay, you don't need to worry about where these objects are placed or what the texture is or any of this stuff. All you have to worry about is the animation. So typically what happens is a rigger would come along and they would set up some sort of rig like this. And that rig is, like I said, just allows them to focus on just that, those elements. If I jump into Firefox and I'll type in character rig, and I wait 3.5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh man. And somehow I believe that going up to here would make it go quicker. And it does. Look at that. So weird. So these are character rigs. So like this guy here, in order for the animator to go through and animate this guy, they don't grab the pieces of geometry and animate the pieces of geometry. They grab these things. Okay? And if they want to move the feet, they grab the one by the feet. They want to move the hands, they move the ones by the hands. They want to move the shoulders, or if they want to move the pelvis, or if they want to move the, I'm assuming that's his knee control, they move those. Okay? Now this is very, very basic, but it does get into stuff that's very, very complex. Like this guy is obviously has a bit more of a rig going on. If I do an Andy rig, Andy. Here's the Andy rig right there. These are a base set of controls. You can actually turn controls on and off, and there's a bunch of controls I could turn on the face. I can swap the different controls and do a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so this can get very, very simple to what we're looking at now, to very, very complex, which is what this would be. Okay.
So, but that's like for an advanced rigging.
Right, this is an advanced rigging. This is actually at Savannah College of Art and Design. This was one of their master projects. I don't remember the guy's name, but he built it. And it's used all over the place. If you go to 11 Second Animation Club, or 11 Second Club, whatever it's called, you'll see the Andy rig used a lot. One of the cool things about it is you can turn it from a girl into a boy. You can change its clothing. You can do lots of different things. It's pretty neat rigged. Okay. So here is our thing, and like I said, all we can do is grab these. Now, not only can we just grab these items that we want to animate, but I can't move these away. I can't go to the move tool and pull this thing out of here. I can't rotate it in any direction except the direction it's meant to rotate in. Okay?
Can you move around it, or are you just showing us right now?
I'm just showing you right now. We'll move around in a second. Okay? And all of these are basically set up to move exactly the way it should. So if I go to my front view and I grab one of these pieces, you can see that the pivot for this is right at the center of this cylinder. So that means that as I rotate it, it's rotating in the exact spot it needs to. If I were an animator, I'd have to make sure I had that all set up and whatever. Okay? As a rigger, I'm able to get it in the exact spot and never have to worry about it again. The same thing up here, and grab this one. And this one is in the exact spot it needs to be to rotate perfectly around that thing. Another cool thing about rigging is that we can set things up how they're built in the real world, and then we never have to worry about it again. Okay? Once this is set up, I don't have to worry about, whoops, I accidentally moved it, whatever, 6 units further than I should have. Okay, and that's all reset. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through this, and we're just going to set some keys on this thing. And we're going to do it just like I did before, where we do the bad one, and then we're going to do the better one, or the best one. Okay? So grab all of the circles. Okay? There's a little pound sign at the bottom. Don't grab the pound sign. Just grab the circles.
What circles?
These little half circles, yes. Thank you.
Oh, just grab the little circles?
Mm-hmm.
Half circles? Okay, got it.
Okay?
Oh,
We want to grab all of them. Okay? If we just grab one, it's only going to rotate the one. So if I just grab this bottom one and rotate it, it's only rotating that bottom piece. Okay? So I want to shift-click all of these so that as I rotate it, it's bending like that. Okay?
what are we supposed to do?
Make sure you've grabbed all 4 of these pieces.
Got it.
And then you're in the rotate tool, and then as you rotate, you can see how they're all rotating together. Okay?
Oh, okay. Shift click?
Yep, just shift click them.
Wait. Shift click on. Come on.
Okay?
Got it. Now what?
All right, so now that we have these, let's set some keyframes.
Wait,
Mine selected everything. Is it supposed to?
Okay? Because we're setting our keyframes manually, meaning one at a time, and we're doing it ourselves, we're not letting AutoKey do this, we have to make sure that we do things in a specific order. Okay? The first thing we have to do is we have to go to the frame we want our keyframe on. So right now we want to go to frame 1, which if we look in this box right here, right there, it should say 1. We're on frame 1.
yes, we are.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So then we want to set a key. Now we can't just hit, we probably could just hit S. But remember we set up that hotkey last time where we want to click on the item and hit S. Okay? So I'm going to click on Rotate Z and then hit, oops,
S?
and then hit S. Okay, so I clicked on Rotate Z, I clicked on this bar out here, and then I hit S. Okay, now I can tell that the keyframe got set because it turned that salmon color. Okay, if it doesn't turn that salmon color, the keyframe didn't get set. You have your, click the channel box there. There you go. Now you can see that. Okay, so it turns salmon. That's the indicator that there's a keyframe on this thing. If it's an expression, it'll be purple. If it's something else, it'll be another color. If it's something else, it'll be another color. So for right now, we're doing keyframes. Salmon is the color for keyframes. Also, if we look in the slider here, you'll see how we have a tiny red tick right at the beginning of our thing, right at 1. Okay, that's another indicator that we've set a key there. All right, so now we're going to try to figure out how far is it from here to where it falls down. Who knows? Okay, so let's go and give ourselves some more frames first. So right now we're dealing with a 24 frame range. We want to set this up to, let's say, 100. Okay, so right in this box here, we're going to type in 100. Okay, and that just gives us more frames because in 60 frames, we're not going to have a whole lot to deal with. All right, so let's go to, I like to kind of break it up into even chunks because we're going to go one way and then we're going to go the other way. Okay, but the first time we go, it's only half of a direction, right? It's not, we're not going from the second bounce is going to go from here all the way to this side. Right now we're in the middle and we're going down. All right, so we're just going to set this one to, let's say 15.
Now you started at the top segment or the bottom?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Either way, it's going to just select all of them.
Wait, so we're going to go to scene number 13 now?
No, frame 15.
Frame 15.
Okay,
Got
and
it.
then rotate it down until the tip of it almost touches the ground.
Oh wait, you mean like that for the top part of it?
If it takes 15 frames for it to go from here down, how many frames is it going to take for it to go the other way?
How do we get it back up
It
again?
would take 30 if we were doing it perfect, right? But no, it's still 30-ish. So we would subtract a little. So let's say 25. Okay. So a little bit of math. 25 plus 15.
Is 40.
40. Excellent. So we're gonna go to 40 now, and rotate it to the other side.
Oh,
Shouldn't it be the same amount of tilt as the
Okay,
other one
so-
we just set?
No, we don't want it to be the same amount of tilt. We actually want it to be a little bit less tilt. Okay, so the first one was almost touching the ground. This one's going to be a bit above the ground. Okay.
Now do we set a keyframe for that too?
Yep, just set a keyframe for that, and then we're going to go a little bit further. So let's see, the first one was 15. Then we were at 25. So let's go less. So let's go 20 frames now. So let's go to 60, and then we'll set it for less. So it's not going to go nearly as far.
Oh, so, oh, wait.
Okay, so we're just rotating it now back in the other direction at frame 60 to go just not as far rotated. And S to set a key. Now as we get closer to the end of this, pay attention to what your rotate values are, because it's a lot easier to see, you know, how far did I rotate that last one? I don't really remember. If you look at that rotate, it's 23. So I know my next time it shouldn't go that far. It shouldn't go to negative 23. It should go to like negative 15 or something. Okay, so let's go 15 frames up now. And then we'll rotate this to negative, I'm going to say negative 10-ish.
Wait, now we're going to 75? What was that?
So that was 15 frames. So let's go 10 frames.
So that's 85.
And then we'll go even less. So my last rotation value was 8, so I'm going to go to like 4.
So do we just twist a little bit then?
Mm-hmm. And then again, we move it up again. Rotate it a little bit less.
90?
And then here we're actually getting into this little fine area of, you know, we're dealing with single frames. So we just kind of go up a little bit and then move it and then go up again and maybe reset it to 0.
Okay, so then up to 93?
Right, 93 should be your last keyframe-ish,
And
okay?
that would be straight up, correct?
Straight up,
Okay.
just like Paul Abdul said.
Okay, then S.
Okay, so once we're done, we should be able to hit play and take a look at our animation.
Ooh, I did good. Woohoo!
Okay, so this is where we come into the creative part, where we're really trying to look at this and figure out, is this looking the way we want it to look? Is this, you know, animation-wise, is this looking correct? And right away, I'm kind of seeing that maybe at the end of this, it's going a little bit quick. Okay, and this is the junk one, so I'm not even concerned about it really. We're just going to delete the animation anyway. But if you look at it, you see it's going basically at a constant speed, back and forth, back and forth. And then right at the end, though, we kind of get this like really quick snap at the end of it. Okay. So I'm not too concerned with that. But let's pretend that we wanted to finesse this one a little bit. We wanted to manipulate our keyframes a little bit more. Okay. So we're going to stop it and rewind it.
You mean go back to the beginning?
Yes. Okay. And then we're going to open up the dope sheet. So hit the rewind button, and then in the shelf area, you see the DS, that's your dope sheet. Okay. And as long as everything is still selected, which it looks like everyone has that, we're seeing all the keyframes for these items. Now, the reason we went to the dope sheet and not the graph editor is because the dope sheet allows us to manipulate time only. We're not manipulating values. We're only manipulating time, which is important because I'll just show you why we don't want to do that.
Make it to full screen for the dope sheet.
You can do it. If I'm in the graph editor, it's very easy for me to accidentally grab this and not only adjust its time, which is what I'm doing here, but also adjust its value, okay? So I have to be careful that as I'm working in the graph editor, I don't do something I don't want to do. And the same thing with the dope sheet, I have to adjust those as well, okay? So the reason we're using the dope sheet is because there's all the keyframes. I just grab these things and can just slide them around to get it exactly where I want it to be. Okay, now there's this box up here. This is the summary. We don't touch the summary. It doesn't do anything. Oops, it does. It does until I say it doesn't. There we go. Okay, so if you're careful, I guess we can select that. I've never been able to select it before. Today is a happy day. Okay, so if you marquee around that work dope sheet summary, then we can just middle mouse button and slide that over. Okay, so what we're going to do is in the dope sheet, we've zoomed out. So just using the regular Alt right mouse button, we can zoom out. And then we can marquee these and middle drag them so that they're all kind of a bit closer together.
I appear to not be.
So we're just kind of redistributing these things and just kind of playing with the time. That's all we're doing here.
Yay.
Yes, I'm in the move tool. Middle mouse? Yes, always use the middle mouse in here and the graph editor to move your stuff around. Okay, don't look specifically at my time to see what it's doing. You want to really look at it and see, you know, what is the spacing looking like so that you can play with the spacing.
Are we taking a break soon?
Yeah, we can take a break in a couple minutes. Okay.
Oh, what are we doing now?
Just redistribute these. Just kind of pull them a little bit closer together so that instead of us going, like in mine, instead of us going to 93, I went to 89, I think is my last one. All right, but yours doesn't have to match that. I don't want you looking at mine saying, here's his numbers. I want my numbers to match that.
Could you show me how? Oh, that looks good. All right. Play tag. Ta-da.
Okay, and then you can really kind of pinpoint certain areas and say, you know what, between this keyframe and this keyframe, it's still going a little bit slow. Like I can tell on mine, right there it goes really slow. Let me see, right there, okay? So at here to there, I want to adjust that. So after 75-ish, right about here, I want to just kind of pull these in. Okay, now we are adjusting their speed, but we're adjusting their speed by adjusting their keyframes. All right, we haven't touched the graph editor. We haven't tweaked anything in the graph editor. We haven't done anything at all except set our keyframes and then adjust where their timing is happening. Okay, all the work in the world in the graph editor is not going to get you to that spot if your keyframes are not set up in the right spot. All right, if I have a keyframe at 1 and a keyframe at 100, I can't make it go the speed I want within that range just by using the graph editor. Okay, I can control the speed in certain spots. I can make it go faster here or slower here, but you can't do certain things. Okay, so your first step in any animation you do is to make sure the keyframes are in the right spot. And we make sure the keyframes are in the right spot by doing this kind of stuff, setting some keyframes and playing it out and looking at it and seeing what it looks like. Now there's another thing that we have to keep in mind, is that Maya is a computer program. And right now it's playing back as fast as it can. Is it playing back at real time? We don't know. It could be playing back at 13 frames a second. What that means is that when we render this out and we take it into our program, it's going to go twice as quick, okay, ish. So what we want to do is we're going to hit stop and we're going to rewind it. And we're going to do what's called a play blast, okay? And I believe we set the options up in our shelf here, the PO, play blast options. So we're going to click the PO.
Oh?
The Po. And then our options are time slider or start and end. In this case, we can just use time slider.
Where's that
Okay, right at the top.
at? Oh.
Okay. We want to change our format. Instead of AVI, which is a terrible format, we're going to use image.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. And then for the encoding, we want to choose Maya from the list. Okay, so format image, encoding Maya. And then under scale, we want to set that to 1.
Wait. Oh.
Okay, you might have to scroll down a little bit.
Found it.
All right, so those are the 3 options you're always going to set in here. Image, Maya, 1 is the scale. Okay, and then hit play blast.
Then apply play blast.
Yep. And so what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to
Make
save everything in there and then make a little movie of it. Okay. Now this movie, if you can kind of look, it's always cut off for some reason. But it looks like it's about 24 frames per second, which is what this far right number is showing. So I can pretty much guarantee that that's how fast it's going. Now you can stay right there. I'm just going to show you inside Maya though, that we are working in 24 frames per second. If we are working in 30, we can come up here and say, well, I want to see this at 30 frames per second.
Sorry, I missed the drop sheet.
Okay, so then we can see how it's going to look at that frame rate. We can see how it's going to look at 10 if we needed to see how it's going to look at 10. You can see how slow it's going at 10. You can see how it's going to go at 50. And sometimes you want to do this. You want to look around and see what happens if I speed it up? What happens if I slow it down? Does it look better in certain parts if I make this go a little bit quicker here or a little bit slower here or anything like that? Okay? And because this is a sequence, you can actually bring this into After Effects and you could adjust some stuff in there with like timer mapping and whatever else.
This definitely does make it pretty cool to see how it would look in a movie format.
Right. Right. Instead of us just kind of looking at it in the viewport where, you know, we don't know how fast it's going. Especially when we get into character stuff. Characters move incredibly slow. You might get like 1 frame a second or 5 frames a second. You have to do a play blast in order to see what's going on. Okay? So we can close that window. All right, let's take...
Ooh.
All right, so here's where we're at with our little guy here. We set some keyframes. We move those keyframes around to get them where they need to be. And then we play blasted it to look at, you know, getting better timing. And of course, we could tweak this again further and further and further, but I want to move on with it, okay? So we're going to go back. We're just going to rewind our stuff. Okay, it's very important that we stop our playing if we're playing it and go back to the beginning. Yes,
How do
ma'am.
we get rid of the time frames now?
The keyframes?
Yeah.
We're going to do that right now. Okay, so we have to be on frame 1. Otherwise, when we delete our keyframes, it'll just stay wherever it was locked to. Okay, so if it was bent over and we delete our keyframes, it's going to stay bent over until we reset it. So we're going to go here and grab all the stuff again. So I'm just shift clicking all the pieces again, just like we did the first time when we grabbed it. And there's several ways to delete keyframes. I'm going to show 2 of them that are kind of the popular ways to do it. All the kids are raving about it these days. The first way is once we have everything selected, we right click on the rotate Z in the channel box and then just go to delete. Okay. So we right click, delete selected, and that's going to delete the keyframe that we have there.
Got it.
Okay. The other way to do it, and this is, you know, again, it's just your own preference, but I like to just double click down here. Oops, rewind it. There we go. You double click down here over on the left side. It highlights everything. So this big red bar is highlighting all of my keyframes. Then I can right click and say delete. Okay. So that big red bar, we're going to play with that a little bit more. It actually allows us to move keyframes. It allows us to scale keyframes together. So if we realize the timing is good between them, but I just want this whole thing to happen a little bit quicker, we can just grab all the keyframes and just squish them together. Okay? So it's kind of a neat thing to be able to do. So now we can just double check and just kind of scrub through, just click and drag in your time slider and make sure all those keyframes are gone.
Aha.
Okay, so we shouldn't see any movement in there. And if we do see movement, that means we missed something. We always want to check and double check our stuff just to make sure. Because you don't want to get, you know, to the end of this and screw up. All right, so we're all good. Our keyframes are deleted.
Yep. Mine are.
All right, cool. Let's save this file as. So file, save scene as.
File.
And just leave it as stickrig, but put an underscore in your last name in the name. So in mine's going to be stick_rig_Sarcona. Okay? That way, in case something gets lost, we can always search for your last name and find your stuff.
Okay, so save as then?
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and set this thing up. Now we're not going to do all of them at the same time. When we do the fancy one, we do one at a time. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to click on this bottom one here, that bottom half circle, and I want to set the keyframes for that, get that to look good.
How do I select that one? Just this one.
What was that?
I can't select, it's selecting all of them. You can't just select
No, right, it's going to select all of them. Okay, it's not actually selecting all of them. Because these are parented together, when I click on this one, it's going to show that these are selected, but they're not. Okay, I can still rotate just that one. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to set keyframes on this one. We're going to do the same procedure on it, but let's take a second to plan it first.
Can we go to number 1?
Okay, yep, always start on number 1. Okay, and then we set our first keyframe there.
So S then?
Yep. And then go up however many keyframes, 12.
12 keyframes.
And then rotate it.
Which way?
Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm rotating mine to the right for some reason. I always like to go to the right first.
Okay, so then set keyframe for that one?
Yep.
Okay.
And then go up however many keyframes. I think it was 28 or so.
28. And
Yeah.
on the other side?
And then go to the other side and make sure it's less, right? Because we don't want it to rotate more than the other time. Okay, and always look at that value up here where we see rotate, -47 right now. So when I do it the next time, this -47 should be less than that. So it should be 40, okay, or whatever.
So then when you go to 42, then you move it to the other side again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so little
And just go back and forth, back and forth.
Oh, 42.
If you need to add more frames, add more frames. They're free.
Okay, S. Ah. Yes, sorry. And, okay, so 42, 14 more frames. So 56. Right, 56.
Okay, and you really, honestly, you don't even need to really look at and do the math for all the frames. You can look at the spacing between these red marks and say, here's a spacing here. This spacing is less, this spacing is less, this spacing is less, and it just trickles down. You don't have to be accurate with it to say every single time it's going to cut in half and subtract or whatever. All right, so the next part of this is that we're just going to go to the next branch. We started off here, and we got that to look good. Then we're going to go to this other one. All right, so we're going to start at that next one. Now, here's where it's going to get possibly a little bit tricky, is depending on what kind of thing this is, this thing may or may not move at the exact moment. This thing might be driving the animation, or it might be being led by the animation. Okay? So we're going to do it in a being led fashion. All right, so we're using this bottom one. This bottom gear is kind of like a driver. So there's going to be a little bit of a lag here. And what that means is that when that bottom one is going like this, that one above it is like this. Okay, so the bottom one's going to start going, and then the other one is going to be back a little bit. And then as this one goes, it's going to kind of whip down and then come back up. Okay, and that's going to be the same process. So all we have to do is offset our keyframes a little bit. Okay, so if you have a piece of paper, you can write it down, but you don't need to write it down. Okay, don't try to be too precise in this. It's an art. Okay, so you want to look at it as an art. So I can look at all these keyframes and say, okay, this one's going to happen here. So I'm going to go 2 frames before it. Don't do that. All right. We want to use our eye to see this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up like 2 frames. Okay, so I have the second one selected.
So we're not going to go to, we're going to go to number 2 then?
Right, we're starting at number 2 in this case. Okay, and then we're going to set a key on number 2.
So what do we do?
Don't we have to know the keyframe from the bottom one first?
No.
You don't? Okay.
No.
Then do we just move it a little bit?
Nope, we don't move it at all. We're setting our 0 spot right now. We're setting, this is where we want you to start moving, okay? And then we're just going to scrub in the timeline, just click and drag in the timeline until we get to the point where this one has kind of bottomed out and is starting to move back up, okay? So I'm watching it, I'm watching it, I'm watching it. Oh, there it is, okay? So right about here at frame 11 or 12, it's about 12, is when it kind of bottoms out, and then it starts to go back up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a couple frames after that point. So I'm going to frame 13, 14, and then I'm going to rotate this down and then set a key, okay? So this is what it's going to look like, is that this one's going to come down, and then that one's just kind of waving a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to do the opposite for the opposite side. Wait till it bottoms out, go up a couple frames, and rotate it the other way.
Okay.
Wait till it bottoms out.
So do you go the other way, like that way?
All right, hold on. All right, so the next step in this is just work your way up, doing the exact same thing, but just looking at the branch below it. Okay, so when you're doing the third one, you want to watch until the second one is done moving that way, go up a couple frames, and then set it. So I'm not looking at the bottom anymore. I'm just looking at the second tier. Okay, I got to set my first keyframe, so I'll set a first keyframe at 4.
4?
Yeah, 4 was good. And then watch that second one going, and then rotate that other one down.
Oh, okay. So you just
Okay, so ignore this bottom one here. Don't worry about what this one's doing. We're worried about what that second one is doing. And then we're just going to watch it again until that one stops moving.
Okay, then.
And then rotate it.
I understand what it's supposed to do. Where am I sitting at?
Should we save it too?
Yes, you can save it too if you haven't saved it.
Right.
All right, if we get to the point where this thing is kind of bottoming out and hitting the bottom of this, what we have to do is just go through and tweak some of those keyframes. And then it becomes a matter of, well, which keyframes do we need to tweak? Where's the issue at? Because here I could just take this one and rotate it up, and now there's not a problem, but obviously that's not going to look right. I could take this bottom one and pull that up a little bit, and that may correct it just enough to where it makes sense. Okay? Sometimes it's going to be a mixture of I need to take away a little bit from each one of these branches, or sometimes I can just take away this bottom one and it's good. So I'm going to go in the graph editor because I need to adjust a value. And here is the first value that I need to adjust. Okay? If I look at this and see where my red ticker is, right here, that's where it's hitting. So if I look at the value of it, right now, if I look at the top, it's at 47. If I change this to 40, or 38, or 35, there we go. 35 seems to be a good number where it's just hitting the bottom of it, and that's it. And then I can go forward a little bit and see how it looks here. Okay, again, we're bottoming out. So I'll take this number down to negative 40 there. That's good. And then I'll go up a little bit. We're good there, we're good there, we're good there. Okay. So I'm just adjusting those values. And then going back and just double checking to make sure that this is still looking good, to make sure that it's still working the way that I want it to work. And there's a little bit of glitchiness at the end. That's no big deal. I just need to go back in there and finesse those keyframes to get it to do what I want. Don't try to get this entire thing to all stop at the same moment of this. Okay? If this is, let's say, like an antenna, okay, and we're kind of like waving this thing back and forth, that bottom base of it is going to come to rest a lot sooner than the top of it is. Okay? So what I mean by that is that this bottom piece is basically here, right there it stops. Okay? And at this point that it's stopping, well, further, right here where it's stopping, the top piece is still going, that piece is still going, this piece is still going. It has that overlap of action where everything's not coming to rest at the same time. It's just kind of like trickling down the chain. The bottom comes to rest, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. Okay? So again, this is just, it's a good exercise to do because we get a lot of work in here, just kind of working on where we're setting keyframes, working with the dope sheet to make sure things are timed out right, working with the graph editor to make sure these things are playing nicely. Now we could also go in the graph editor and tweak some of these things that are in here. I wouldn't want to go into this and try to look at all of these because it'll just drive you crazy. So we focus on one at a time. I focus on just the bottom one first and tweak this until it looks right. Okay? Now looking right is totally subjective. Okay? Obviously it's going to be an animation, so there's some playroom in here. But one thing I want to look at before I even get into tweaking any of the handlebars is what do the heights say about this thing. Okay? Because just like we talked about with the bouncing ball, it should go a certain distance, and then every time after that it should gradually get less and less. Okay? So if I click on this first one and look at this value, 35. I go to the next one. That one's negative 40. Okay? It's obviously less, but when we flip it to the other side, it's not. Okay? It's actually going 40 degrees that way. So I want to make sure that that is less. So I'm going to go to negative 30 here. And then on this one, I'm going to go to, that's 37, that's even more, 25. Okay? It doesn't have to be even. I'm just kind of making it even just to kind of make it a little bit easier on the math. Okay? The distances are pretty good. What was that one? 15? Yeah. Negative 10. The distances are pretty good, so I could adjust those if I needed to, but I don't think I do. That's 10. This one's going to be 5. This one's going to be negative 2. This one will be 1. Okay? So you can see how my graph starts off. Let me hit F to frame it. It starts off very big. It goes all the way up here, and then it comes down, and then less. Okay? So every single one of my graphs should have that. Okay? Because it's not building momentum. If it was building momentum, this would be going the other way. It would start off very slow, and then it would gradually get faster and faster and faster. But because it's slowing down, we have to assume that these things will get smaller. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is go through my graph editor, make sure my numbers are good. Okay? I can also look at the spacing here, make sure my spacing is good. And then once I'm done, I'm going to look at a couple things. One thing, if you look at this, and this is kind of like an unofficial rule, right here, you can see where my keyframe is. And you can see that just behind my keyframe is the graph. And it's actually getting a little bit higher than my keyframe is. You'd never ever want to have your keyframe differ from the limit that you've set, okay? Or the graph differ from the limit we've set. So even though we've set a keyframe here, let me zoom in on this so you can see it. Okay, even though this is such a slight thing, you can see that this is actually pushing nearly 35.5. There's 35.5. Okay, it's almost up there, and we shouldn't have that. Our graphs or our keyframes should be the extent of our motion. All right. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and this is where those automatic, the default tangents come in handy. Okay. By default, we're set to spline up here, and spline tries to keep everything nice and smooth. I could also look at clamped, and see clamped really didn't do anything. I could look at linear. That's definitely not what we want. Okay, we want some easing in and easing out of each one of these transitions. There's flat. Now flat will do exactly what I want it to do. It'll say you've set a keyframe at 35. I'm not going to let the graph go any higher than 35. I've set it down here at 30. I'm not going to let it go any lower than 30. Okay? So I recommend also taking that and putting it to clamped. Now we could also do this where we kind of take these, not that. I take this and I make them weighted tangents. So here's that little thing we did before. I told you to write down curves, weighted tangent, and then tangents, free tangent weight. And now we can go through and grab these and control how these things are moving at each interval. Okay? So if this is moving a little bit, if I want a little bit more lag time, every time I kind of hit these spots, I'm stretching those out. And what's going to happen is it's going to go quicker to that spot and then slow down and hang out a little bit more, and then whip around and go slower on that side. Okay? So I'm just in the move tool, I'm just grabbing a handle, oops, and then holding shift to constrain it, and then middle mouse button dragging, not much, just slightly. And every time I do it, I'm doing it less and less and less. Okay? And at this point, I may even come over here and just kind of pull this in more. As it gets tighter, it gets a little bit firmer. I don't want it to have a whole lot of lag there. So I'm taking these and kind of shrinking these ones down while I take some of these other ones and maybe stretch them out a little bit. Okay, and I think I want to actually just move these down a little bit. There you go. All right, so what I just did to that one, I want to go through and do to the other ones as well. Okay, so I would then grab the next one in the list. First go through, I can flatten it all out right there. And then go through and check my values. 39, good. Negative 38, I can do better than that. Let's say negative 34, or even 32. Okay, so that's negative 32, and then this one is going to be 26. These are random numbers I'm pulling out of my head. Negative 20. Let's see. Maybe 16. In the end, I'm looking at the graph. That's what I want to look nice. If the graph looks nice, most likely that animation is going to look nice. No guarantees, but typically it's how it works. 8. Yeah, we're going to leave at 7:30. We're almost done here. Let's see, 2. And then this one will be negative 1. Okay. And then once I do that, I'm going to go to curves, weighted tangent, tangents, free tangent weight. And then again, just go through and just kind of play with these things just to kind of get a little bit more hold on the ends. just so there's a little bit more easing and a little bit more snap in the middle is what that's doing. And then over here, I'm going to start to tighten these ones up. There we go. Okay, and then always go back and preview it. And you can definitely see there's a little bit more whip in there. There's a tiny bit more speed as these things are coming around, and it's kind of emphasizing it even more. As this thing comes down, it's going quick and then kind of slowing down, and then whipping around and slowing down, and then whipping around and slowing down. All right, that's what we just did in the graph editor did. Okay, and you can see just by doing some of that, some of the weirdness I had at the beginning is kind of worked out already. Okay. So you can go through that. We're going to work on this more next week. We're going to basically scrap this one and start over again, okay? Because I want you to get that repetition. I want you to get the understanding of using the dope sheet, using the graph editor, setting keys, and how to kind of look at the graph editor, look at your keyframes, look at the animation, and work with all of these different venues, okay? So I have nothing more for you today. I recommend you save, back up your preferences, and then whenever you want to, you're free to leave.